Gary Tonin is one of my favorite grapplers to watch and study. It literally feels like this man is on X Games mode all day. I mean, seriously, who gives up the back like that? Now, some might say he's reckless, but I believe he has a trait that every grappler can work on and cultivate.
Do something? Sure. I think I need to cancel my glasses prescription because I can clearly see me and you together.
Alright, seriously though, all jokes aside, closely tied to charisma is confidence. Now, let me ask you guys something. If you believe that you can escape any position, how would you grapple? In fact, if you fundamentally believe that no one can ever pin you, how would the outcome of your matches and your jiu-jitsu game change? Today I wanted to focus on pin escapes and discuss why mastering pin escapes will change the way that you train. Pin escapes can be practiced in almost every training session and will definitely be used in every sparring session. Now, closely tied to pin escapes is submission escapes, but I'll save that for another video. I think the learning curve for specific submission escapes is a bit different. Nonetheless, something very interesting happens with our psychology when we master pin and submission escapes. That is, we build our confidence.
When you don't believe you can be pinned, when you don't believe your guard can be passed, you'll take risks because there's no downside to your actions.
Alright, so what is a pin? Now, pins are wedges around the body reinforced by either the floor, your grips, or even the wall that prevent movement. Now, there are 5 main pins in Jiu-Jitsu, and 2 of them actually don't score any points, but nonetheless will present a problem that you'll have to deal with. Number 1 is side control. Now, side control is an interesting one because there's different variations. This is the traditional one. This here's twister side, where you're looking away from your opponent, and this one is Keisagatami, where you have a scarf hold on the top upper part of your opponent's body. Now, the second is the north-south pin. Now, again, this one doesn't score any points, but is great for transitory purposes or even submission attempts. Third, we have the mounted position, which scores 4 points. And from this position, there's a myriad ways of transitioning and attacking from just the mount itself. Fourth is knee on belly. Now, this is a good transitory position once you've passed guard to start scoring up your points. All right, 5 is the rear or back take. Now, this is the ultimate position that you want to be in, and also the ultimate position that you want to know how to escape every single time you get there. Like the mount, this scores 4 points. Finally, I want to touch base on the turtle position. Now, although technically not considered a pin, it's a position that gets talked about a lot in positional escape instructionals, and it puts you in jeopardy of getting scored on from the rear. All right, so inside position is king. Winning the battle for inside position is the blueprint for a successful jiu-jitsu player. The key themes of pin escapes basically revolve around these 5 major points. Now, number 1, it's keeping your limbs tight. 2 is being able to off balance. 3 is getting some kind of a frame in. 4 is an insertion point. And 5 is to gain majority inside control. Now, number 6, we'll just park that aside for a second, but once you've escaped, you have an option to choose to rather escape, reset to a neutral position, or counterattack. But that's a bit more of an advanced thing that we can get to later. Recently, I saw a quote today and it really resonated with me, and it says, "What I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand." And this totally applies to learning pin escapes. And I think the best way to learn pin escapes is getting comfortable in those pin positions, staying calm, and then thinking about how you can achieve the 5 principles. Now, throughout your journey, you're going to find a myriad of techniques and ways of getting out of certain pins. And it's really easy to forget the 5 principles, but basically, like, all of the pin escapes follow that same principle and those same rules. Another point I should mention is to put yourself in those positional rounds where you put yourself in a disadvantageous position, and maybe you do let someone pass your guard, but you utilize that as an opportunity to work your escapes. Now, maybe you're a beginner and you're getting pinned left, right, and center. Well, that's your opportunity to start working the escapes. But eventually, once you start getting good, it's also important to kind of look back and refine those pin escape details. A game that I've been trying to play and implement is utilizing counterattacks. And so in order for me to get into a counter-attacking position, first I need to actually work my pin escapes. before I can actually work my counterattacks. For me personally, that method is a really good way for me to challenge my pin escapes as well as constantly refine details. And again, like ultimately build up my confidence. So this week I kept the pin escapes study guide a bit short. And the reason being is that I think pin escapes are so fundamental, but at the same time, like a lot of the moves and maneuvers out of certain pin positions are all based on a fundamental principle. And it's just drilling and working those and challenging those principles every day on the mats in order to get better at your pin escapes. That said, I did forget one major slide, and I'll make a YouTube playlist for it, but I wanted to shout out the BJJ Globetrotters seminars. A lot of them are free on YouTube, and there's some really excellent talks on theory, but most importantly, understanding inside position and how to utilize it everywhere in Jiu-Jitsu. So the best instructional to learn fundamental escapes is the Fundamental Escapes by Lachlan. Now, if you're ever caught in a pin, chances are this instructional will have an answer to that specific pin and methods of escape. But again, this all ties back into the fundamentals of having inside position. And then just keep that in the back of your head whenever you're studying these instructionals is, you know, what are the methods in which Lachlan, Gordon, or even Danaher is showing how they're getting the inside position. That said, the success that you get from hitting these moves will definitely help you build the confidence moving forward. Once you get better at pin escapes, you'll start to realize that there's some specific issues that you're going to be running into, and the Pillars of Defense series goes in detail on specific responses and specific reactions. Another important thing that I want to point out is the distinction between static and dynamic pins. Now, dynamic pins means whatever you're trying to shimmy and make space, guys will start following you. And then, you know, it's like realizing what to do in those moments. And the final thing is that the Pillar of Defense series introduces the idea of beginning to counterattack, and from there, making space and capitalizing on your escapes. All right, so I'm going to be honest here. This was actually the very first Danaher instructional that I watched. While it taught me a lot of really good escapes, the problem that I ran into was immediately once I went into counterattacking, I didn't have the good mechanics of actual finishing. And so therefore I couldn't really capitalize on being a good counterattacker from escaping bad positions. That being said, I think people would really benefit from learning how to actually escape position first and then working in the counterattacks. All in all though, I would say this is an incredible DVD in the sense that it totally shifts your brain into playing jiu-jitsu in a whole different type of way in using counterattacks immediately after a defensive cycle. In almost every escape from a pin, there's definitely a counterattack involved in it, and Danaher will teach you all the magic tricks to how to hit those off. Finally, now I talked about this instructional on my other videos, but I wanted to shout this out in the pin escapes one, just because I believe that the kipping escape is a very underutilized position, just because overall, heuristically, the kipping motion is something that can be used in other scenarios, such as grip breaking, obviously like mount escapes, and even making space from half guard. The kipping motion is a motion that's used in most pinning escapes, and ultimately, having the kipping motion in your toolbox is definitely something that's going to open up a lot of escaping and counterattacking opportunities for you. All right, so that's it for this week's study guide. Again, if anyone's interested in wanting to keep these as reference, please follow me on Instagram and I'll send you a link to the Google Drive. Also, I'm going to put a link in the description for the playlist I made for the BJJ Globetrotters content. This week, I kept the chart pretty small, but that's just because I think pin escapes are so fundamental, and yet at the same time, there's actually a lot of very basic principles that apply throughout with almost all of the escapes that you're going to learn across time, and it's just a matter of putting in the hours and refining your pin escapes to your personality and gameplay style. Thank you guys so much for tuning in this week. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like this content. I'll definitely have more in the future, and just remember, if you have time to kill, you have time to drill. Peace.